Okay, everybody, take a deep breath, sort of clear your mind because we're going to hear round number two. And we are going to be Kelly Robertson and Adrian Barrow, who are hyphenated. Kelly's been out here in the waiting room, so we'll let her in. And Jen, you tell me, I think Kelly's in one city and Adrian's in another place. Is that right?
I think that might be right. I'm not certain that I've actually met Kelly, although I definitely know Adrian quite well.
Okay. Well, I see a conference room there and it's got Kelly's name. So Adrian may be with her. Hi, Kelly. Welcome. And why don't you introduce your team, Kelly, and just take it from here and share your thoughts and your proposal with us.
Thank you, Julie. It's very nice to see you again. Thank you very much for inviting us, giving us the opportunity to present who we are, what we've done in the past, why we think that's relevant to you, and how we'd like to approach the assignment that you and I talked about a couple of months ago now with this. I'd like to introduce you to my partners in crime here, Will Esparza and Kelly Robertson. Will and Kelly, as they will attest, run a creative company called Hyphenated. My company is called Catalyst Strategy, and we decided that we would join forces today to solve this problem. For reasons that will become obvious as we begin to talk about who we are and what we do. I know that a couple of months ago when we first started talking about this assignment, it was the broad contours of it were the need for a marketing plan, a marketing strategy, excuse me. But it's our experience that the very best marketing plans and marketing strategies really come to life in creative ideas, and they just have more value if they turn into creative ideas, because ultimately that's what people out there in the world consume. They don't consume strategy decks or marketing plans, as important as they are. They consume the work, the activation ideas, the conversations, the stimulus that we put out there. And that's the reason why I really wanted to partner with these guys, because they are the world's best at coming up with amazing ideas that people want to play with, that people want to invite into their lives. So that's why the three of us are here. I'll let the guys from Hyphenated talk a little bit about their company, about the way that they see the world, the role that they want to play in the world culturally and commercially, and then we'll pivot from that into talking a little bit about our proposal and the way we've approached this assignment.
Great. So, we're Hyphenated, and just on a quick note, we started this company because we believe brands have a responsibility that if they're going to succeed long term and be here in the next 25, 50 years, they have to generate shared progress. It's got to be good, not just for the shareholders, it's got to be good for the people that they're serving. So it can't just be about revenue and about bottom line. It needs to be about how they're helping stimulate those communities, how they're helping those communities move forward and creating kind of microeconomies, or for that matter, a sense of belonging. So that's the start of it. It's why we're called Hyphenated. We're Latinx and women-owned, 100% independent. We believe in the power of culture. So not necessarily the end products, not what travels just in music or in fashion or in art. Like at the essence, at the core, like why is culture being created in the first place? What are the headwinds? What are the tailwinds? Why is it affecting behavior? Why is it affecting attitude? What pursuits are people having, and what are the challenges that they have? And because of that, we're creative led. So we think that creativity is a business multiplier, and if that's to be true, then we must be independent. The name is super simple. It's not our last names because we wanted it to serve as a reminder for how to dimensionalize people, right? Not make archetypes, not make personality traits, really present people as the whole that they are. All the pains, all the tribulations, all the passions, all the motivations. And ultimately, if we better understand people and we're empathetic about who they are in these communities, whether urban or suburban, whether middle of the country or the left or the right coast, you'll definitely have a better opportunity at resonating and building a bond. So yes, the hyphenated identity is greater than the boxes society puts them in. I started as a graffiti writer, did artwork for Snoop Dogg, the East Siders, for Eminem, for Ice Cube, and you know, went to art and design school thinking I would do album artwork for the rest of my life, only to have my first real big break in the business, to work with Apple and Shy Day and Media Arts Lab was part of the original 25. So I see that as that was my MBA, if you will, working with Lee Clow directly. But I spent my career, whether in Richmond, Virginia, or San Francisco, or New York, or LA, working at some of the most elite agencies in our industry. So been privileged in that way. I met both Adrian and Kelly at RGA a little over 6 years ago, and I'll let Kelly kind of speak to who she is and all that good stuff.
Good morning. I'm Kelly Robertson. I did not do album artwork, nor was I a graffiti writer, but I spent 20 years in strategy at advertising agencies, between traditional storytelling, brand building agencies, and more innovative digital agencies like RGA and AKQA. And my flavor of strategy is really strategy in serve of output. So as Adrian said, one of the reasons we joined forces is it's not necessarily about a plan for you guys, it's about stories and activating culture and people around what you guys are motivated to do, which is bring horses more into everyday life and touch everyday people. So my background was a strategy team, strategy departments, to meet the needs of clients as they're extending their brands, and taking advantage of all the channels that came into view, from video in our pocket to social, and how we can use all those touch points to be engaging and to motivate people. And I'm trying to advance the slide.
Thank you. And then myself, Adrian Barrow, originally from Perth in Western Australia, a long time ago. I won't even tell you how long, because I can't remember. I kind of grew up with my toes on a board in the sand in the ocean. Have worked in the United States for the last 20 years on and off. I've worked in Britain and Europe, in Hong Kong and Asia. And throughout that time, I've always been kind of interested in what makes people different to each other and what makes people the same as each other. And believe it or not, there's been a lot made in the papers and online over the last couple of years about how we're different. But through all of my travels and all of the work that I've done for so many clients and so many brands throughout my career, I'm always struck by what makes us similar around the world, what we share in effect, what collects us together rather than what divides us. And with that, I'm kind of defiantly optimistic about the future, because I think that we share so much in common. Sometimes we forget what's important. And I think part of this assignment is to remind people about what is truly important in terms of their relationship with horses, despite how modern society gets and how modern media and technology gets. That's me.
And if I look at what the three of us have done together and describe what we do well, the first thing is stories that drive culture, a history and careers, building stories for Beats. Will can talk a bit about how he helped in the early days build the Beats by Dre team, or the brand, as one of the first 10 to a $3 billion acquisition. But stories out in the world that move people, drive culture, are deeply resonant with the interior motivations that people have and unlock potential. So campaigns and stories. And then we also talk about brand identities and brand systems that connect lifestyles, the experience of a brand as an interface, and the way it comes to life visually and verbally, to create a connected experience. So stories and systems, and the way they come to life to help brands connect with their audiences.
you know, this is just to suggest that we're thought leaders in our industry, and we've won every award. And more importantly than all of that is that we have a strong point of view about what modern marketing is, and we know how to do that quite well. To the degree that all of our relationships, all of our work are referrals. And that's important because we provided results through the work and we gain recognition and fame that, you know, all of our past clients, for the most part, are good friends now. And that's how we work. We love to partner with you at such a degree where we can have honest, hard conversations so that we can move the needle on your business, move the needle on your organization, and kind of the gap that needs to be filled. We have a few ways to doing that we think is important. So it's grade A talent. Essentially, we do not believe in FTEs. What that means is we have a global freelance network. We customize and build bespoke teams for the assignment. So, you know, in the case that we have now, we were to move forward and partner, we would identify the people that you're failing to connect with, right? Maybe some of them will be naysayers. Maybe some of them will be people who grew up with horses, but horses are no longer in their lives. And then maybe some of them will be people who still have a relationship there. And why we do that is that allows us to attract the best talent. The best talent in today's world does not want to be ball and chain to a desk. They want to be free roamers and work on assignments that they truly believe in. So purpose-built teams, purpose-built for the challenge and the opportunity. Clandestine operation, we're an embedded model. So what that means is we're going to be an extension of this team. We're going to have conversations where Jen or James or Brian can just pick up the phone, text us, email. We're not going to walk away for 3-4 weeks and then give you the big reveal. If you choose to be in the kitchen with us, we welcome it. And so why we believe that is that's how you're going to bring some fundamentals and some nuances that, you know, will shorthand the solution for us. And we're going to bring perspective that's going to spark real conversation and real debate. And we call that beautiful collisions, right? So essentially, we'll tell you the ugly truth, no matter what it is. And then we'll give you meaningful creativity. We'll essentially, and we expect the same, we're going to find the best way to solve for the challenge at hand. So the world needs new narratives, plain and simple. It's why we're here. We're called hyphenated for 2 reasons, right? Dimensionalization of people and places, but also to serve as the bridge for communities. I think, you know, Adrian put it best with, we're defiantly optimistic ourselves about, you know, the kind of future we can have. And a lot of the unrest in the world, a lot of the things in the world, a lot of the disconnects, a lot of the misunderstandings, a lot of the difference of opinions, and a lot of the problems in the world happen to be with the internet changed the world. So everyone knows exactly how it works now. And they're taking matters into their own hands. It's over 40 years of corporate profiteering, the golden age. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. These people they're not anti-capitalist by any means. They're just finding their way. They want to hack the system in their way. They want to take power in their way. They want to create narratives in their way. And we bring light to that and how to best connect with it. And it's really a generation that's kind of spearheading this. If you look at Gen X, they got mad. That wasn't enough. Millennials, we got optimistic. And essentially, it wasn't enough either. So then Gen Z came in and they were realistic. They're like, no, guys, we're doing it wrong. We think it's going to be about this and going to be about that. And we're just going to change the world on our own. And either you're with us or we're leaving you by the wayside. But the beautiful thing about that, like if you look at, and I'm sure you're very familiar with Compton Cowboys, growing up in LA, I grew up spending a lot of time down there because, you know, my parents are Mexican American and so first gen immigrants. And for me, it's when I look at kind of what's happening in the world today, it's active, complex, and openly shared identities. Right. And so these identities, they're kind of open source, right? They're an open sourcing kind of operating system and they're becoming influential. They're no longer influenced. And that's the big kind of pivot here. That's the big shift here. They're becoming platforms in their own right. And these are two great examples of those platforms. And why they're doing that is they really want to service people. They really want to service the planet. And they're doing it for reasons that they deem the right thing to do. For instance, Naomi Osaka with mental health. It's bigger than her is what she realized. It's bigger than the game. And I'm going to become a voice for that. I'm going to also become a platform for that. And you're seeing it in music as well. You're seeing it in other forms where it's kind of manifesting and changing the way we look at things. You know, there's a group of people, Black Joy, for instance, is a great, powerful thing. Big smiles, big love, big family. And there's musicians, there's artists, there's just common folk who are trying to create this defiant optimism in pursuit of tangible progress. They're changing their reality, knowing that they can't necessarily change the whole thing, but they're going to ensure that at least at a familial, at a friendship, at a community level, there is progress for them to be had, progress that they can feel, progress that they can touch. And a lot of that is empathetic and communal. And there's this great quote from Stuart Wallace. History tells us that a value shift is triggered by the creation of a new story about how we want to live. We're in the beginning of many new stories with a lot of chapters and a lot of nuance. And you know, that for us encapsulates what the job to be done is. It's why we think we're here, to be honest. It no longer resonates what a horse can mean from an emotional standpoint, from a companion standpoint, from, you know, what it means in someone's life, right? Because the people are finding new ways to live, and we think we can bridge that.
So we believe brands, associations, movements can either be a part of that shift in that storytelling or be left behind. And so what we want to talk about is what we do as a collective to help advance the American Horse Council's cause with narratives and stories. So we build new meaning in brands through new narratives and culture, storytelling, and the role of horses in culture and storytelling. And what we mean by that, if we unpack it a bit, when the slide advances, will you just pull it up so I can keep going?
Just press it once, otherwise it just skips.
So when we talk about new meaning, we talk about actions, communities, perceptions. Who are the people that we can use and work with and empower to build this new meaning for horses, for the American Horse Council? And when we talk about new narratives, we talk about points of view, new voices, dimensions. And we talk a lot about shared stories. And what we mean by that is, what is it that you want to say that people who are advocates and fans also want to say, and how do we co-create those stories together to get them out in the world? And then when we look at what we mean by meaning and meaningful brands in the American Horse Council, or horses as a brand, we unpack it in 5 different dimensions. We think that meaningful brands, meaningful movements share these principles. The first is shared values. So what are the values of everyone on the Zoom call? Why do you spend your time as parts of the American Horse Council? What are the values you uphold that are bridges to the people you want to serve and activate and move in the world? So defining the shared values. So, and the people that you stand shoulder to shoulder with that share these values with you. We talk about being action oriented. So I talked about shared stories and empowering communities to tell the story. It's not about talking or saying things, it's about doing. So what is the value you provide to move people, create emotional connection, to have them empowered to act on your behalf? We also talk about resonance over relevance. Resonance is something you feel and moves you. It's playing an active role in cultures, in communities, not by just reflecting these cultures and communities, but getting in and contributing to advancing, helping these communities. And that's how you become emotionally resonant. People stories. When people tell your story, you become a more dimensional, interesting, unique movement and brand, authentic to the people who are telling your stories. And then we talk about consequences, and the council is interesting because it's not set up like a corporation. The consequences you can have on the world, what is the measurable impact beyond the bottom line, beyond profits? emotionally, satisfaction-wise that you can contribute to communities? What is it measurably that you're setting out to do that benefits communities that we can measure and to make sure we're impacting with the narratives and stories, marketing plan that builds those narratives and stories? And so, I'm so sorry for the lag, you guys. The next slide defines very specifically the outputs and the outputs and deliverables that we do as a team. But Adrian will talk about it in more detail as we applied this to your proposal. But very specifically, we build strategic foundations. So what is the clear, actionable framework that brings your council to life? The belief, the vision, the mission that you have, and the brand strategy and the audience definition, the white space mapping. Who are you competing against, or who is competing within your audience's mindset, lifestyle for their time and energy? So developing that strategic foundation, again, in the proposal, we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like for the Horse Council. Then creating and refining an active brand identity. So how do you take that strategic framework and apply it to become a modern brand visually, verbally, in the language and messaging you put out there, and within your brand system? How does it come to life? And then storytelling, again, activating the ideas, getting the stories out in the world, not just stories that we tell to people, but involving the community in integrated campaigns, social strategies, influencers, and partnership strategies.
So let's apply some of what we talked about, some of what we are expert at to this assignment, as we understand it. I think the caveat here is that I had a really lovely conversation with Julie. It may have been 6 weeks ago. It may have been slightly longer than that. We spent a lot of time talking about the work, not just of the council, but of the Marketing Alliance going back over many, many years, perhaps even a decade. You've been very active in trying to encourage more Americans to enjoy a lifelong relationship with horses. The council's efforts, some of the individuals and collective efforts on this call now have included things like National Pony Ride Program and barn visits and riding lessons certification program, and all well-meaning and all actually creating value in the way that we think about value being created in the world, but perhaps not enough value, and perhaps not sustainable, and perhaps not as impactful as all of the people on the council and the steering committee would want. And there's kind of reasons for that, both reasons in the industry, in the horse industry, but as Kelly and Will were talking about, reasons in culture, right? We no longer see horses in the media on a day-by-day basis. We, for the most part, I'm talking about the majority of people who live in urban America, we no longer see horses on our highways or in our towns. Kelly lives in a part of the Bay Area where she in fact does see horses at the fringe of the metro area in Marin County. But for most of us, you know, the drive to work, the drive to Starbucks, we don't encounter horses in the way that we typically would if we were 50 years, certainly 100 years ago. But, you know, as we think about kind of like how brands, in this case, the brand of a horse, how it becomes part of our life or becomes disassociated with our life, it's really through the culture that we consume. So the songs we listen to, the movies we watch, the TV shows we watch, even the advertising that we see around us. And it seems to us, at least, that horses have kind of taken less and less prominence in that popular culture. And so unless we actually work in the industry or work in rural America, where horses play an important role in industry, or a part of the racing industry, for example, we no longer encounter horses in modern urban life. And of course, that becomes amplified as a problem where so many of us are sort of consuming media on a day-by-day basis through our phones. And unless horses and horse culture permeates our Instagram feed, our Facebook pages, then for all intents and purposes, we're kind of, they're invisible to us. We think that's a problem, a challenge, but we don't think it's insoluble. We think that there are typical ways in which we can resurface horses basically into people's lives, even if our lifestyles aren't conducive to us kind of encountering horses on a day-by-day basis. Now, part of our confidence for that comes from the fact that there remains solid respect for horses in America's farming industry, in rural America. Moreover, if you think about what's happened in the course of the last 15, 18 months, there has been this mass migration from inner cities to the suburbs, to the exurbs, to rural towns. Many of our colleagues have actually left living in LA and have moved to places which is reacquainting themselves with rural life, is reacquainting themselves with barn life, and they are encountering horses again in their lives. And that's a real positive, because those people are posting about their lives in Facebook, on Instagram. They're posting in platforms like TikTok and Twitch and so many other things. And so as urban dwellers, we're beginning to kind of re-see horses in our modern lives through those mechanisms. We're also, as Kelly and Will mentioned, beginning to see colors of community, communities of color, I should say, reclaiming aspects of their heritage through kind of bringing horses back, through bringing barn life back into their communities. And I know you guys know this already because you're actively trying to encourage that. And part of, I think, what we take hope from is that there is a groundswell, even if it's a small, but it's an important bottom-up groundswell of horses re-encountering people. And so I think really what this is about is, even though our lifestyles and our, where we live, we no longer encounter horses as much, we do think that there is an irreplaceable role for horses in our hearts and our lives, in our culture, in our story, in our narrative. And that's really the strategic challenge, which is how do we bridge that gap? How do we accelerate that movement to horses feeling as though they're an important part of our lives again? Now, the way that we've approached this is really to recommend a two-phase assignment here. Phase one would be strategy and a creative platform development. And then phase two would be campaign activation and what we call go-to-market. And the easiest way to think about this is if you take the things that Kelly was mentioning before, who are the people that we need to define as our audience? What do they currently believe about the role of horses in their lives? If they don't have horses in their lives, either because they don't consume horse content, or they don't follow racing, or their children, don't have a horse, they don't go to state fairs anymore. We need to define who the audience is that we can reach out to, use what it is that they know about horses, use what they believe in the recesses of their mind as being positives around horses, and rekindle that, re-spark that, and create the pathways for them to journey back to the places where horses live in this country, either on media platforms or in real life. And then we need to turn that into a creative platform. I think in my initial conversation with Julie, I think you'd referenced, we need our got milk. We need a rallying cry. We need, in our words, a creative platform that galvanizes all of this insight around who these people are, and kind of turns that into something that can be activated in media. The way we do this in a more granular way is we do an audit of the cultural context with which horses live, looking at basically who are the people who consume the cultural content that we might create, looking at the category as a whole and what is competing against our category of horses for people's attention, for people's money, and then kind of thinking about what the Horse Council itself through the Marketing Alliance can bring. What is the source of expertise? What is the content that the Horse Council, who are the influencers that the Horse Council has access to? What are the programs that the Horse Council is already highly engaged in that we can use as content to be able to supercharge this new narrative. And then we're going to take that, as I mentioned before, and turn that into a creative strategy, into a campaign brief, and then subsequently turn that into a strategic narrative. And the easiest way to think about this, really, in the context of the marketing plan, the strategy that you've asked for a proposal about, is what's a more emotional way of taking all of these insights that we're going to surface in the 4 Cs and in the creative strategy and bring that to you so that you can sense the excitement, you can sense the passion, you can sense the opportunity, and then turn that into this creative platform, into what might end up being a simple set of words that we execute off with creative teams. Phase 2, if you're on board with all of that thinking, is really turning the intellectual capital, the ideas, the first thoughts into a platform that can be executed in the world. That could be executed in media, and we can certainly define what the media pathways are, where the media touch points are. It can be executed as real life campaigns. If we think back to the work of the Horse Council over the last 10 years, pony rides, barn visits, certification programs, they happen in the real world. And what we need is basically not just simply a digital or an advertising campaign. We need a phygital, which is a physical and a digital campaign that can engage people in a media sense, but also can represent participation opportunities for people in the real world. Not just simply the pony rides, not just simply the state fairs, but ways to bring horses in a physical way into the places and spaces where we live. And then there is a go-to-market plan that says, okay, if we take those ideas, that creative raw material, some of those creative executions, there needs to be some investment placed behind making that real in the world. That can be through media plans, that can be through participation programs, that can be actually back through the industry and the industry partners who are represented on this call, a toolkit, a playbook that individual industry partners can look at and say, oh, now I know what my marching orders, what it is that my company can do, my organization can do to advance the cause of this specific campaign. Not a big fluffy idea, but a specific campaign. And actually that might happen over the course of a year or 2 or 3. And so we have something that basically builds as a go-to-market plan over the course of the short to medium term. Then we want to look at basically putting the measurement in place, the metrics plan in place that enables us to measure not just people's excitement, but actually people's participation. How much time are people spending with horses? How much money are people spending on horse content? How much are we able to move the needle from horses are kind of less and less a part of our lives to horses are now a prominent part of our lives? And we need a metrics toolkit that helps us understand the progress that we're making over time towards that. So a 2-phase approach, strategic in nature in the first phase, and creative and execution oriented in the second phase. Now, of course, I know that we all know here that budget is difficult to come by in this world. This thinking costs money. The creativity costs money. The activation of this will eventually cost money, time, effort. And so what we want to do in phase 1 is to make sure that all of the people who are stakeholders really feel as though this could be the solution to address what is a decades-long problem. And then before we move to spending money in campaign activation and go-to-market, really have a solid alignment about, do we feel confident that this is the creative platform that might redress this slide that we're facing? Potentially even use the results of phase 1 almost as an investor deck to go out to the broader horse industry and say, here's this campaign that we're advocating for. For all intents and purposes, who's in? Who wants to contribute to this, either in money or in energy or in kind? And then at the end of phase 1, say, what is the pot that now exists after we've done all the strategy work, so that when we go to phase 2, we have an invested group, we have a budget that is known, even if that's for the first phase. We have media channels and media partners that have been identified. We have influencers that are on board that want to come and contribute to this. And so we know what our raw material is to be able to activate the second phase in the go-to-market. But we won't do that until we basically have an idea that everybody feels passionate about, that feels confident about, and that we're dealing with kind of, you know, a known universe of effort and money and time, so that we can actually do the best possible job in phase 2, knowing that that might come in 2022, for example. So I'll pause there and see whether you, or maybe I'll close there and see whether there are questions that you have in relation to this general approach, questions to do with who we are and how we would approach this.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. Okay. We have just a few minutes for some questions. You can put those in the chat box and we can get to those, or please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question. A really nice slide deck, guys, a really good comprehensive overview. Adrian, just for those that don't have the proposal right in front of them, remind them what the fee is for phase 1.
Yeah, we've estimated that phase 1 would cost in the mid-60s. So I think we put a price of $66,000 for, remind me again, Will, 6 to 8 week strategy sprint.
Yeah, I'm going to pull it up now so that we can be looking at it. Or actually pull it up on your.
Okay.
And the way that we've costed that, Julie, while the guys are pulling that up, is there are there's some professional time that would be spent auditing in the way that we described. There is some creative time that is going to be spent coming up with the creative platform and rendering that in a way that can be presented to the people on this call, so that we can discuss a tangible idea rather than a theoretical plan. We can debate the merits of that. There is time in the first phase. There is money time to be able to refine and evolve that idea. But in our experience, marketing plans and marketing strategies are more valuable when they have some sort of creative artifact sitting at the end of it. And so we built in some time. So we might be a little bit more expensive than either the competition or that you might have imagined us to be. And it's for that reason that we built in some creative time to come to you with something that's tangible.
Thanks. That's very helpful. Okay, guys, I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes here to throw out your questions. So lob away. This is not a shy group, generally speaking. They may be having Zoom fatigue.
Right. Yeah. We were really struck by the august team that you have there. You know, it's interesting. Just as an aside, before people are getting up the confidence to ask questions, you know, I was talking to my wife last night, and I said I have this amazing group of people that we're presenting our proposal to tomorrow. And I said to her, you know, it's been a long time since I have been a horse person. That it's been a long time since horses were part of my life. I can remember back to my childhood where I took a trek through the Australian Alps on horseback. And my wife said, "What are you talking about? You are a horse person." We grew up as kids in Western Australia going to the Perth Cup every year. We grew up stopping for a moment in November when the Melbourne Cup ran. And that was one of the biggest kind of cultural moments of our lives. She said, "You're every bit a horse person, as anybody is." And so I say that because part of, I think, what this assignment is to remind people that while horses might not have been part of their life over the course of the last 15 months, it has really been so much a part of the fabric of all of our lives if we just think about it more than a second.
Thanks, Adrian. Okay, guys, I'm going to have to wrap up with these folks so we can get to our other business. Anybody, I'm going to give you one last chance to lob a question out there or throw a question in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Julie, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, Vicky. I was just going to say thank you. I didn't know if someone was going to jump in with a question, so please go ahead.
I think I'll ask the quite, first of all, I think it's a really great presentation, and, you know, clearly you all are outstanding storytellers and sort of brand and culture experts, which I think is fantastic. As you kind of develop this big idea and we come up with a campaign and it is rolled out, how do you find that we would best measure success?
I think that, first of all, we need to be clear about what our benchmarks are. So actually, we have to ground all of this in what our objectives are, what our goals, and that can be either awareness goals, that can be consumption of content, that can be economic impact, it can be time spent with horses through any of these pathways. Then I think what we need to do is to create a measurement and metrics approach that says not just what are our objectives, but what are the best measurement tools for assessing, you know, whether we're on the right track. Some of those are going to be key performance measures of the campaign that could be measured by engagement in, as Kelly suggested, you know, social media. It can be, for example, the degree to which we're able to enlist and enroll influencers and the amount of content that they're creating in their worlds to their audiences. It can be through bespoke research that we might commission, although I would say that while that is very precise, it is also expensive and
Right.
tends to detract from putting money behind the idea in the marketplace. We can also, if we're smart, find media partners who are able to help us carry our story, and that media deal might include a measurement deal as well. That's also kind of possible. So if you think about Facebook is both a media company, but it's also a measurement company. And so depending on what the channels are that carry the messages, we might be able to convince those media companies to give us measurement along the way that shows us the performance of the campaign.
The only thing I would add is, because this is a new narrative, you need a new narrative, point blank. It's patience, a measurement tool that looks for signals and indicators, but, you know, understanding that it's gonna become a snowball effect over time, right? You don't change narratives overnight. And that's kind of the truth of it all. It's like, this is an 18, 24, 36 month process. And that's when you're going to be able to see real impact. And I think it's easy to feel that things won't be working at first. But there'll be signifiers in culture, in conversations that we will be creating that will make it clear that it's starting to work. And that's the only caveat I would add to that.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you guys, Kelly and Adrian and you team members over there. So we're going to let you drop off, and we will be back in touch with you very shortly.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks for hearing us out. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.